History Effect is about this idea of all your past experiences informing a bit about who you are now, how you think, what your attitudes are, how you relate to people, how you engage with the world. And then the other theme that sort of came up in the later stage of writing was around how would it feel when you're at that sort of, that last quarter of your life, those last years of your life, and how would you reflect on a life lived?
Way back when it began, the history effect was strong. With some choice I had, it gave me too much to think.
It had been 9 years since the release of the debut record, and Steve and I had moved on to other projects. I did the initial sessions on my own, and I'd come into our studio here in Melbourne. I'd throw lots of ideas down. I'd try and get hooks and themes going, so both lyric and melodic hooks, and I'd start multi-tracking, recording lots of instruments around an idea. And I'd sort of keep the best stuff, and then I'd send that to Steve.
It became a bit like musical ping pong, because Matt would hit me his thing and I'd do a little bit of my thing, which would add some extra sounds or a bit of extra
sort of
shaping.
And forehand it back.
Like that.
And then we'd send it over to Nick in Ireland, who would start throwing some bass ideas down. And then it would come back to me, and then I'd do a level of work.
I originally became involved with Tarmac Adam through Paul Hester. It was more of a vehicle to reconnect with Paul, I think, because we hadn't seen each other for a couple of years. The relationship that I'd made with Steve and Matt from the first record meant that I stepped into the breach of the second album as well.
So a lot of my focus is on structural elements to do with maybe the form of the song, what parts of the really strong, cohesive verse to chorus, whether it needs a bridge, does it lift enough in the vocal melody when we get to the chorus. When each of us gives a little bit of extra inspiration and a bit of an extra push to the other one, so that the song keeps stepping up and up and up. Matt and I did a lot of work in our studio shaping these songs, but it's when we brought in the other players that they really started to blossom. So having Ruben Alexander come down from Sydney and play drums, gives it this new sense of energy. We had Josh Barber put his percussion over the top of that and just added those rhythmic sparkles, that icing on the feel of the songs.
And then you turned up in Melbourne. What bass did you turn up with?
I had my beautiful 64 or 63 P bass, and and that was a real joy. Although we did it in, my parts were just sort of like 4 days. The guys in Tarmac Adam really do enjoy a kind of a, dare I say, a postmodernist view of referencing other people's work in a kind of a hybrid style, just so that you've got some mantle to be able to play together on, like a manifesto from song to song.
If you were to replace me, to know how I think.
When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was into bands like XTC, Tears for Fears, The Smiths, and then more recently, I suppose, over the last 10 years, bands like Elbow, Wilco, The Shins. I suppose in some ways this record, you can hear bits of all those bands maybe on this record at different times.
If I was to replace you and all the things you say.
So then you did your parts. We sort of massaged it and then headed to Nashville and mixed with Rob Feaster. We wanted to work with Rob Feaster, who's a mix engineer based in Nashville now. He actually mixed our first record. And we really wanted his sound, or the way he approaches mixes. They're very big sessions. There might be up to 60 to 100 tracks in the way that we layer things.
Rob was able to sort of open up the sound of these layers even more with some beautiful effects and reverbs. The vocal layering and the harmonic sense in the vocals is, I think, a big stamp on the Tarmac Adam sound.
Tarmac Adam sounds are very layered, very lush, very cinematic sound, but very much with a pop or an indie pop edge to it. And Rob gets that. So we wanted to work with him, and he was working, he's based in a fantastic studio, Quad Studios, which has a really interesting history of its own. But there's a great sound that comes out of their main studio. So yeah, we thought it'd be great to work with him again and get his input into the record.
One of the most enjoyable things is thinking of what those other sounds could be. So we really had a great time thinking of, could we incorporate strings into this, or could we incorporate some sort of other orchestral instruments, French horn sounds, those amazing soaring, jubilant sort of timbres that sound fantastic in pop music.
When you work on something and it's yours, or it's lots of people contribute, and then it becomes a public thing.
Yeah, it's no longer you no longer own it like you thought you would.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the phone.
There's the phone. Yeah. Or just get that.